Hello everyone. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to give it a like and share it with others who need to hear this message. Your support helps us reach more people with stories that matter. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. How did this story inspire you? Have you ever experienced or seen a moment that challenged the status quo? Share your thoughts. We'd love to connect with you. The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the community pool, its golden rays dancing off the rippling surface of the water. The air was thick with the smell of sunscreen, the shrieks of delighted children, and the soothing hum of laughter from families sprawled across colorful beach towels. It was a perfect afternoon, the kind that made the relentless heat bearable with the promise of cool relief in the water. Darius Freeman stood at the edge of the deep end, his lean frame poised and ready to dive. At 17, Darius was a strong swimmer, his body honed from countless hours spent perfecting his strokes. His dream was to join the state's competitive swim team. But for now, this community pool was his sanctuary, a place where he could lose himself in the rhythm of the water. As Darius adjusted his goggles, a familiar voice rang out behind him. "Ready to show off, champ?" called his little sister, Mia, her braids bouncing as she clutched her inflatable dolphin. "Always," Darius replied with a grin, playfully flexing his arms before stepping onto the diving board. His heart raced, not from nerves, but from the sheer joy of diving into the shimmering water below. With a graceful leap, he dove into the pool, slicing through the water like an arrow. The coolness enveloped him, washing away the heat of the day. He surfaced with a triumphant whoop, shaking droplets from his short hair as Mia cheered from the edge. But just as Darius swam toward his sister, a sharp voice cut through the joyful noise. "Hey, you there, what are you doing here?" Darius turned, confused. A middle-aged woman in a sun hat and a floral cover-up was marching toward the pool. Her face twisted with anger. The chatter around the pool fell silent as heads turned toward the commotion. "You don't belong here," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "This is a private pool. You can't just come in and act like you own the place." Darius blinked, his heart sinking. He climbed out of the pool, his dripping feet leaving small puddles on the concrete as he faced the woman. "Ma'am, I live here," he said, his voice steady but uncertain. "My family has a membership. I've been coming here all summer." The woman's eyes narrowed, her lips curling into a sneer. "I've never seen you before. And I know everyone who lives here. You need to leave before I call security." Darius felt his chest tighten. Around them, whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Some people shifted uncomfortably, while others exchanged knowing looks. No one stepped forward. He tried again, his voice quieter now. "I have a membership card. I can go get it if." "I don't care about your card," the woman snapped, cutting him off. "People like you always think you can break the rules." Darius froze. He understood the unspoken accusation in her words, the weight of centuries of prejudice bearing down on this single moment. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone. His mind racing, he dialed the only number he could think of. "Mom," he said when she picked up. "I need you. There's a problem at the pool." Miles away, Eleanor Freeman sat in her home office, reviewing legal briefs for an upcoming civil rights case. At 45, Eleanor was a formidable attorney known for her unyielding commitment to justice. Her work had taken her to courtrooms across the country. But in this moment, she was simply a mother hearing the distress in her son's voice. "What's wrong, Darius?" she asked, already reaching for her car keys. "There's a woman here," he said, his voice cracking. "She says I don't belong. She's calling security." Eleanor's grip on the phone tightened. "Stay where you are. I'm on my way." As she drove toward the pool, Eleanor's mind raced. This wasn't the first time her family had encountered discrimination. But it never got easier. Each incident left a scar, a reminder of the biases that persisted despite all her efforts to combat them. When she arrived at the pool, Eleanor spotted Darius immediately. He stood near the diving board, his shoulders hunched and his hands shoved into his pockets. Opposite him was the woman, her face flushed with indignation. A small crowd had gathered, their whispers filling the air. Eleanor took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked toward them. She wasn't just Eleanor Freeman, attorney at law. She was a mother, and no one was going to humiliate her son without consequence. Eleanor approached the small crowd with steady steps, her heels clicking against the pavement. Every eye turned to her. the quiet authority in her stride commanding attention. She stopped a few feet away from her son and the woman, her eyes scanning the scene. Darius stood stiffly, his usually confident demeanor overshadowed by hurt and confusion. The woman, on the other hand, puffed herself up as if preparing for a battle she was certain she would win. "Excuse me," Eleanor said, her voice calm but firm, cutting through the murmurs. "Is there an issue here involving my son?" The woman turned toward Eleanor, startled at first, then quickly recovering her composure. "Your son? Well, yes, there is. This pool is private, and he doesn't belong here." Eleanor folded her arms across her chest, her expression unreadable. "And what makes you think he doesn't belong here?" The woman hesitated for a moment, as though realizing the trap she was walking into. "I've lived in this neighborhood for years," she said, her tone defensive. "I've never seen him before. And I know everyone in this community." "That's interesting," Eleanor replied, her tone measured. "We've been members here for months. Perhaps you haven't been paying attention." The woman's face reddened. "Well, if you have a membership, you should prove it. People lie all the time to get into places they don't belong." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face. She glanced at Darius, who silently handed her the small card he kept in his swim bag. Eleanor held it up for everyone to see, her fingers steady. "This is our membership card," she said, her voice ringing out clearly. "It's registered under the name Eleanor Freeman. If you'd like, I can also provide ID to confirm that I'm the same Eleanor Freeman who owns the house on Hawthorne Street." The woman's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The crowd began to stir, their murmurs growing louder. A few people exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly re-evaluating their earlier assumptions. "Now," Eleanor continued, her voice sharp with controlled anger, "I'd like to know why my son was singled out. I didn't see you questioning anyone else's right to be here." I just thought," the woman stammered, flustered and defensive. "It's not personal, I swear." Eleanor stepped closer, her gaze locking onto the woman's. "Not personal? You've humiliated my son in front of a crowd, accused him of trespassing, and implied that he doesn't belong here, without a shred of evidence. If that's not personal, I don't know what is." The woman faltered, her confidence crumbling under Eleanor's piercing gaze. Around them, the crowd had grown quiet, the weight of Eleanor's words sinking in. Before the woman could respond, a lifeguard approached, his whistle dangling around his neck. "Is everything okay here?" he asked, his voice hesitant as he looked between Eleanor and the woman. Eleanor turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said. "My son was falsely accused of trespassing. I've shown proof of our membership, and I'd appreciate it if the staff ensured this kind of incident doesn't happen again." The lifeguard nodded quickly, his face flushed with embarrassment. "Of course, ma'am, we'll make sure of it." Eleanor turned back to the woman, her eyes narrowing. "I suggest you think carefully about the assumptions you make in the future. Your behavior today wasn't just hurtful, it was discriminatory. And it's not something I'll tolerate." The woman muttered something under her breath before turning and walking away. Her shoulders hunched. The crowd began to disperse, a few people offering murmured apologies to Darius as they left. Eleanor placed a hand on Darius's shoulder, squeezing gently. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice softening. Darius nodded, though his eyes were still clouded with emotion. "Yeah, thanks, Mom." "Good," Eleanor said, "because we're not done yet." Unbeknownst to Eleanor, a bystander had recorded the entire confrontation on their phone. By the time she and Darius returned home, the video had been shared across multiple social media platforms, racking up thousands of views. The footage captured every word of the exchange, from the woman's accusations to Eleanor's calm but firm takedown. The response was swift and polarized. Comments flooded in, some praising Eleanor's poise and courage, others attempting to downplay the incident as a misunderstanding. Local news outlets picked up the story, framing it as a flashpoint in the ongoing conversation about race and public spaces. Darius scrolled through the comments on his phone, his emotions a jumble of pride, frustration, and exhaustion. "Mom," he said, holding up the phone, "you're trending." Eleanor sighed, glancing at the screen. "It's not about me, Darius. It's about what this represents. This isn't the first time something like this has happened, and it won't be the last. But we have an opportunity here, to turn this into something bigger." By the next morning, The video had become the centerpiece of heated debates across social media and local news outlets. Headlines ranged from "Mother confronts discrimination at community pool" to "Viral video sparks controversy in suburban neighborhood." The footage struck a nerve, bringing to light the quiet prejudices that lingered beneath the surface of the seemingly peaceful community. At the Freeman household, Eleanor sat at the kitchen table, her laptop open and phone buzzing incessantly with calls and notifications. Darius paced the room, his arms crossed. "Why did they have to record it?" he asked, frustration lacing his voice. "I didn't want to become some kind of poster child." Eleanor looked up, her expression softening. "I know it's overwhelming," she said gently, "but this isn't just about us anymore. That video is forcing people to see what so many of us experience every day. It's making them uncomfortable, and that's how change starts." Darius nodded reluctantly, but his unease remained. He couldn't shake the memory of the crowd's stares, the whispers that had followed him even after his mom had resolved the situation. "I just want things to go back to normal," he muttered. Eleanor reached out, placing a reassuring hand on his arm. "I get that," she said, "but sometimes, normal isn't good enough. Sometimes, we have to push for something better." The video's reach brought unexpected allies to Eleanor's door. Local civil rights groups, community leaders, and activists reached out, offering support and brainstorming ways to address the incident. Eleanor quickly realized that this moment could be a turning point, not just for her family, but for the entire community. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor spearheaded a grassroots movement aimed at tackling systemic discrimination in public spaces. She connected with organizations like the local NAACP chapter and Diversity in Aquatics, pooling resources and expertise to create a campaign called "Water is for Everyone." Their first major event was a community swim-in at the very pool where the confrontation had occurred. The idea was simple but powerful: a peaceful gathering of people from all backgrounds to reclaim the space and send a message of inclusivity. Darius was hesitant at first. "What if people show up just to make trouble?" he asked, his voice tinged with doubt. Eleanor smiled. "Then we'll deal with it," she said, "but I think you'll be surprised at how many people want to stand with us." On the day of the swim-in, the community pool buzzed with energy. Hundreds of people arrived, carrying signs with messages like "End discrimination now" and "Equal access for all." Families, activists, and allies of all races and ages came together, their presence a testament to the power of solidarity. Darius stood near the entrance, his nerves giving way to awe as he watched the diverse crowd stream in. He spotted a group of his classmates from school, some of whom he barely knew, waving at him with encouraging smiles. For the first time since the incident, he felt a glimmer of hope. As the event began, Eleanor took the microphone. Her voice rang out over the murmurs of the crowd. "This isn't just about one incident or one family," she said. "It's about making sure that every person, no matter their background, feels welcome in spaces meant for all of us. Today, we're showing that this community can do better." Cheers erupted as she finished, and the crowd began to disperse into the pool area. People of all races swam together, their laughter echoing across the water. Darius joined his peers in the deep end, diving and splashing with a newfound sense of freedom. The swim-in sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. News outlets covered the event, framing it as a powerful act of peaceful resistance. Social media lit up with images of the diverse crowd, their unity standing in stark contrast to the prejudice that had sparked the movement. Local government officials, feeling the pressure, announced a series of changes. They implemented mandatory diversity and cultural sensitivity training for all pool staff and lifeguards, emphasizing de-escalation techniques and inclusive practices. Additionally, the City Council approved funding for community outreach programs designed to foster understanding and bridge divides. Despite these victories, resistance persisted in some corners of the community. Online forums and coffee shop conversations revealed a lingering undercurrent of denial, with some residents dismissing the movement as overblown or unnecessary. Eleanor, however, remained undeterred. She understood that true change required persistence and vigilance. "This is just the beginning," she told her team during a strategy meeting. "We've made progress, but there's still so much work to do." Months later, on another sun-drenched afternoon, Darius returned to the pool with his friends. This time, There were no stares, no whispers, only the sound of carefree laughter and the splash of water. He dove into the pool with confidence, the cool water embracing him like an old friend. Eleanor sat nearby, watching with a mix of pride and determination. The pool, once a battleground, had become a symbol of resilience and hope. But as she sipped her iced tea, she knew the fight wasn't over. Her phone buzzed with a new notification. A message from a local community leader inviting her to join a panel on racial equity in public spaces. Eleanor smiled, knowing she would continue to fight for a future where no one had to justify their right to belong. In the weeks following the swim-in, Eleanor doubled down on her efforts to ensure the momentum didn't fade. She collaborated with city officials, school leaders, and local nonprofits to establish programs that went beyond the pool. These initiatives aimed to address the root causes of prejudice and ignorance in the community. One such program was Building Bridges, a series of workshops and discussions hosted at the community center. Eleanor invited speakers, activists, historians, and educators to share their perspectives on racial equity and inclusion. The sessions included everything from lectures on the history of segregation in public spaces to interactive activities designed to foster empathy and understanding. Darius attended one of the workshops reluctantly. "This isn't my thing, Mom," he said, sitting in the back row with his arms crossed. But as the discussion unfolded, he found himself drawn in. A speaker shared a story about her own experiences with exclusion and how it had shaped her passion for change. By the end of the session, Darius felt a newfound sense of purpose. "I didn't realize how much history there is behind something as simple as a pool," he admitted to Eleanor on the way home. "It makes me want to do something." Eleanor smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "That's all I ever wanted, for you to see that your voice matters." Eleanor's next step was the creation of a community equity task force. The group included representatives from diverse backgrounds, local residents, city officials, educators, and even a few teenagers like Darius. Their goal was to develop actionable steps to ensure public spaces were accessible and welcoming to all. Meetings were often tense, with disagreements over priorities and funding. Some members pushed for immediate changes, like adding anti-racism signage and stricter policies for staff accountability. Others urged caution, citing budget constraints and fears of alienating resistant community members. Eleanor acted as a mediator, leveraging her legal expertise and calm demeanor to guide the group toward compromise. "Progress doesn't happen overnight," she reminded them during one particularly heated debate. "But if we work together, we can create a foundation for lasting change." After months of discussion and planning, the task force presented their recommendations to the city council. Among the proposals were mandatory cultural competency training for all city employees, including those who manage public spaces, youth outreach programs to encourage diversity in recreational activities, particularly swimming, where historical exclusion had left lasting gaps, accountability measures, a clear system for reporting and addressing incidents of discrimination in public spaces. The city council voted unanimously to adopt the recommendations, a milestone that brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. While Eleanor worked tirelessly on policy, Darius found his own way to contribute. Inspired by the workshops, he started a school club called The Ripple Effect. The club aimed to create a safe space for students to discuss issues of inequality and brainstorm ways to promote inclusion within their school. At their first meeting, Darius stood in front of a dozen students, his palms sweaty as he held a notebook filled with scribbled ideas. "I'm not an expert on this stuff," he admitted, his voice shaking slightly, "but I know how it feels to be judged for something you can't change. And I think we can do better, as a school and as a community." The club quickly gained traction, organizing events like a multicultural talent show and a charity swim-a-thon to raise funds for local diversity programs. Darius felt a sense of purpose he hadn't known before, and for the first time, he began to see himself as a leader. As the months turned into a year, the changes initiated by Eleanor, Darius, and their allies began to ripple through the community. The pool staff, now trained in cultural sensitivity and de-escalation tactics, created a welcoming environment for all visitors. Lifeguards were no longer just guardians of safety but ambassadors of inclusivity. Neighborhood events became more diverse, reflecting a shift in attitudes that once felt unchangeable. The pool, once the site of tension, became a symbol of the community's transformation. Families of all races mingled without hesitation, their children laughing and splashing together in the water. One afternoon, Darius was approached by a young boy at the pool. "Hey," the boy said shyly, clutching a pair of goggles. "I saw your club's video online. It made me want to try swimming." Darius grinned. "That's awesome. Want me to teach you some tricks?" As he showed the boy how to perfect his freestyle, Eleanor watched from the sidelines, her heart swelling with pride. She thought back to that first painful day, the confrontation that had ignited their journey. The scars were still there, but so was the growth, and the undeniable proof that change was possible. Eleanor knew there was still much work to be done. Biases weren't erased overnight, and the fight for equality required constant vigilance. But as she stood by the pool, watching her son help a new generation of swimmers, she felt an overwhelming sense of hope. Darius climbed out of the water, dripping and grinning. "What's next, Mom?" he asked. Eleanor smiled, the setting sun casting a warm glow over the water. "Whatever we make it," she said, "this is just the beginning." As the Freeman family's story continued to resonate across the country, more communities began reaching out to Eleanor for guidance. Organizations invited her to speak at conferences. Schools asked for help implementing inclusivity programs. And social media buzzed with the hashtag ripples of change. Eleanor decided to formalize the work she was doing by founding a nonprofit organization called Ripple Impact Initiative. Its mission was simple: to advocate for racial equity in public spaces and empower communities to take action against discrimination. The nonprofit offered workshops, grants for community projects, and resources to help other neighborhoods address their own biases. Darius became the face of the youth arm of the initiative, speaking at schools and youth conferences about his experiences. Though he had been reluctant at first, he realized how much power his voice carried. "I didn't choose this fight," he said at one event, "but I choose to keep going because the next kid shouldn't have to." The Ripple Impact Initiative launched its first major campaign, focusing on access to swimming lessons and aquatic spaces for underserved communities. Statistics revealed that black children were far less likely to know how to swim compared to their white peers, a disparity rooted in decades of exclusion from pools and beaches. Eleanor worked with local swim clubs and national organizations to address the issue. They funded scholarships for swim lessons, renovated neglected community pools, and hired a diverse group of instructors to ensure representation in the sport. A year after the swim-in, the Ripple Impact Initiative hosted its inaugural Ripple Awards, celebrating individuals and organizations who had made significant contributions to racial equity in public spaces. The ceremony took place at the newly renovated community center in Eleanor's neighborhood. Now a hub of activity and inclusion, Darius was one of the honorees, recognized for his work with the Ripple Effect Club at his school. When he stepped up to the podium, he paused, scanning the faces of the crowd, his family, his friends, and people he'd never met who had been inspired by his journey. "I used to think I was just one kid," he said, his voice steady, "but this past year has shown me that even one voice can make a difference. And together, our voices can create something unstoppable." The audience erupted into applause. And Eleanor, sitting in the front row, wiped away tears of pride. This was more than she had ever imagined when she first stood up to that woman at the pool. The Ripple Impact Initiative caught the attention of national media outlets. Eleanor and Darius appeared on morning shows, podcasts, and even a major documentary highlighting the history of racial bias in public spaces. With the exposure came both support and criticism. While many applauded their efforts, others accused them of overreacting or pushing an agenda. Eleanor addressed the criticism with the same calm determination she had displayed at the pool that day. "This isn't about creating division," she said during an interview. "It's about healing the divides that already exist and ensuring that no one feels excluded from spaces meant for everyone." Darius, now more comfortable in the spotlight, added, "It's not about me or my family. It's about making sure the next kid can dive into a pool without worrying about anything but having fun." As the years passed, the changes sparked by Eleanor and Darius's efforts began to ripple outward. The policies implemented at their local pool became a model for other cities. And the Ripple Impact Initiative expanded its reach, partnering with schools, cities, and sports organizations across the country. Darius graduated high school and earned a scholarship to a prestigious university, where he continued his work as an advocate for equity. He joined the school's swim team. His passion for the sport reignited. Eleanor balanced her growing nonprofit with her legal career, using every opportunity to champion systemic change. The lessons learned from their journey became the foundation of a book she wrote, Ripples of Change: Turning Confrontation into Progress, which became a bestseller. One summer afternoon, years after the initial incident, Eleanor and Darius visited the same community pool that had once been the scene of so much pain. It was bustling with families of all races, children splashing and laughing without a care in the world. Eleanor watched as Darius stood by the water, now a young man with a quiet confidence. A little girl approached him, holding out a pair of goggles. "Can you show me how to dive?" she asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Darius smiled, taking the goggles from her. "Of course, let's start with the basics." As he helped her, Eleanor felt a profound sense of peace. The pool was no longer just a symbol of past struggles, it was a testament to the power of resilience, community, and the determination to create a better future. The ripples they had created were now waves, carrying hope and change to places far beyond their own neighborhood. One quiet evening, Eleanor found herself at a familiar spot, the edge of the community pool. The water sparkled under the moonlight, its gentle ripples a reminder of the day that had changed everything. Darius joined her, sitting beside her on a bench. He was now in his mid-20s, with the same determined spark in his eyes that had carried him through their shared journey. "Do you ever think about that day?" he asked, his voice thoughtful. "All the time," Eleanor replied. "It was one of the hardest days of my life, but also one of the most important. If that moment hadn't happened, I don't know if we'd be here right now." Darius nodded, gazing at the pool. "It's strange how something so painful led to something so beautiful." Eleanor smiled, placing a hand on his. "That's the power of resilience. It's not about avoiding hardship, it's about finding a way to turn it into growth. And you've done that, Darius. I couldn't be prouder." He looked at her, his gratitude clear. "I wouldn't have gotten through it without you. Mom, you showed me what it means to stand up, not just for yourself, but for others." They sat in comfortable silence, the stillness of the evening wrapping around them like a blanket. For Eleanor, the pool had come full circle, transforming from a place of pain into a symbol of progress, unity, and hope. The following summer marked the 10th anniversary of the swim-in that had sparked the movement. The Ripple Impact Initiative hosted a massive celebration, drawing participants from across the nation. The event featured speeches, workshops, and of course, a community swim that filled the pool with laughter and joy. Eleanor, now semi-retired but still an active advocate, stood at the podium to address the crowd. Her voice carried the same calm strength it always had. 10 years ago, my family faced a moment of pain that could have broken us," she began, "but instead, we turned it into an opportunity to create something better, not just for us, but for everyone. Today, we celebrate how far we've come, but we also recommit to the work ahead. Because change isn't a destination, it's a journey." The audience erupted into applause, their cheers echoing across the pool area. Darius stood beside her, beaming with pride as he looked out over the diverse crowd. Children splashed in the water, their laughter a poignant reminder of why they had started this fight. As the sun set and the celebration wound down, Eleanor and Darius shared one final moment by the pool. The water reflected the orange and pink hues of the sky, a perfect metaphor for the beauty of transformation. "This isn't the end," Eleanor said softly. "It's just another ripple." Darius smiled, his heart full. "And ripples can turn into waves." They stood together, watching the water, knowing that their journey had made a difference, and that the ripples they'd created would continue to spread, touching lives and inspiring change for generations to come. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this one. Hit the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when a new story drops. By subscribing, you're joining a community of people who believe in the power of storytelling to inspire real change. Thank you for being here. Let's keep the ripples of change going. See you in the next story.